So I guess this is the first meeting, huh? Doing this. First of all, I want to start by congratulate you guys. The time, 3 months and 6 months, it's great. The 3 month ship is the first ship I actually only have one of. The other ships before that was easy to take and easy to lose. So I needed to have a multiple of newcomer ships and 30-day ships and 60-day ships. But the first 90-day ship I got sober for a very long time. Now it's been yeah, soon to be 21 years, so 20 years today, and in a couple of months it's been 21 years, and that feels great. But I'm going to tell my story in a new way today. I've decided I never did this before, so if I make sense all the way, I don't know, but I'll give it a go at least. Usually I start telling about my old life and what happened, and then how that old life ended, and I kind of find my way into a new route. Then Eric said I had approximately maybe up to 40 minutes to speak, and that's for Sweden, that's a not a very long time, but it's a good enough time to actually talk about the second period of my recovery, which also made me rethink the program a bit, or at least rethink my own life. So I was born in the early 70s in Sweden, in a small town in north of Sweden. Well, not even a small town. I would maybe call it a village. Like 2,000 people lived there. It was like a hick society, a lot of farmers and lakes, swimming in the evenings, like hiking around in the forest. Yeah, just being out in the nature was really good as a kid. I mean, as a small kid living in the countryside, you have animals, you have farms, you have forests, you have all those beautiful things. So I actually consider myself having a really happy childhood. I come from a family of entrepreneurs, and everybody is kind of like are self-made, or my family has this kind of vibe that if you want something, you have to make it yourself, and if you fail, it's also your fault. So me being a bit more fragile, I think, than my sister and my brother, I think that my psyche didn't really like to take responsibility for the things that happened around me. I kind of feel like I was affected from outside in. Even though I was happy, kind of, I really felt in the beginning it was really cool to be a kid and felt that I was in my own bubble, because that felt like I had a world that I could live in that nobody else lived in. But growing up, being getting friends and stuff like that, being maybe 7, 8, 9, 10, I kind of realized that I felt really alone or not included. In the beginning, it was nice because it felt like I chose it myself. When I got a bit older, it felt like it was chosen for me. Obviously, not true, because I mean, I was a popular kid. I had a lot of friends. It's just that I felt outside. I felt not included. And growing up in the countryside is really fun being a kid. But then when you come closer to being a teen and you start to discover new things, then I mean, you can't think about cows and water skiing and hiking in the woods. If you're a teen, you want to see party, you want to meet girls, you want to have musical influence, you want to go to concerts and stuff like that. And where I grew up, there's nothing like that. And if it were, it was for the elderly generation. I'm not sure if you would call it, I don't know, country and western or something. Back here, we call it something else, but it's like something old folks gone to. And I was kind of like the only person in my area that listened to anything that wasn't, yeah, like rockabilly was a really big thing where I grew up, and I liked hip hop, so we kind of like clashed. And I was the only kid that listened to anything else than than rockabilly or the older generation music. So I was kind of like, as a preteen teen, like 12, 13, acting out, stealing alcohol from neighbors, uh, stealing alcohol from my parents, of course, sneaking with it around the small village where I'm from. So my first experience with alcohol was that, I mean, of course, I mean, everybody's, or a lot of people, especially alcoholics, speaks about being having this being transformed into something else. I kind of was kind of secure when I was a kid, so for me it was like really fun. I felt rebellious. I felt that I did something that I was not allowed to, and that is something I really like. I didn't get that warm, fuzzy feeling that many people talk about. That happened a couple of years later when I found something else. So when I was going to my 13th or my 14th birthday, my parents got divorced. So we moved from this countryside thing to a town nearby. Not really big, but a lot bigger than the village I used to live in. From that age, I kind of like, my mom and dad was getting that divorce, and we got to choose who we're going to live with. And since my mom was a lot nicer than my dad is kind of like, it's not a bad person, it was just very distant when I grew up. Uh, I really wanted to live with my mom, so I said that I wanted to live with my dad because I didn't want him to be alone. Because I felt kind of responsible for that. If everybody was to live where they wanted to, everybody would live with mom and nobody would live with my dad. So yeah, I lived with my dad instead, which was kind of good because he was never home, and he had a big apartment, so I could have my parties in that apartment. We started living a bit abroad, well, not abroad. When we say abroad, that means the States. When we say out of the country, that could be anywhere, but when we say abroad, it's always on the other side of the Atlantic. So he started living a lot outside Sweden, so I could have that apartment for myself. So my brother also stayed with us at that point, his older brother. I think he's almost 3 years older than me. So he had a lot of more party friends than I did. So we kind of had our home parties in our apartment from the age of 13, and he was, I guess, 16. We had maybe from 50 people a Monday to maybe 150 people on a Friday or Saturday. So we kind of started arranging parties. And I mean, of course, this is not a good way to be brought up as a kid. I started also working in the restaurant industry as an apprentice when I was 13. Not call if it's called an apprentice, but like a training job. You work under a real chef, and you get to learn the ropes and how to cook. And these two things, dad being away, so I had to actually kind of like we say foster myself, like I'll be the parent of myself, working in restaurants with a lot of older people, and having a lot of older people around me from a very young age made me drink, I don't know, easily 4 to 5 times a week from the age of 13. Really close to that, I also found hash. We didn't have pot in Sweden at that time. It was really rare and hard to find. You had to buy it from a guy in Stockholm, a mail order, and he took a VHS tape and he screwed that apart and then filled it with weed, and then he could send it up to Falun if you send him money in an envelope, because that's how the drug business was done in Sweden back then. Okay, so I tried my first drug, pot, which was really crappy. All I wanted to do was to eat, and I couldn't remember anything. Everything that happened around me was like kind of in a fog. It went 5 minutes and it felt like 2 seconds in the head. So every time I turned around, a new set of people sat around me. So yeah, I didn't like that drug. When I was working restaurants at that time, I was a really good worker because I kind of wanted to impress everyone around me. I wanted everybody to like me, of course, my dad, my brother, and the people I worked with. So I kind of like did what they did, and they were from maybe 17, 18, 19 and up. So I started going out with them to restaurants and nightclubs and stuff like that from maybe 13, 14 years of age. I then started speed the first time when I was 15, and that was something different because then finally I got to be in the party mode and not be drunk and not be affected by those the downers. I've never been that kind of guy. I don't really like downers. It's for me it's all been about up. So from age 15 I started using like a recreational amphetamine user, I would say. And working in restaurants, you back in that day you made a lot of tips, so it wasn't really a big problem handling my drug issues at that young age. But it still was, even though I was kind of like in the center in my age group, I was always in the center of all the people in our small community. I was always at the center of a party. I was always at the center in a circle of friends, but I always still felt outside. I felt that I really need something else. So when I was maybe 16 and a half, I was about to fill 17, I think. I moved to Stockholm and starting working as a chef. Still not legally, you get legal age of drinking when you're 18 in Sweden, so and you're allowed to go out to nightclubs and stuff like that. So I moved to Stockholm when I was 17. I had many years of clubbing and restaurant experience in me already, so I kind of felt that I was really old. I couldn't look more like, still looked like a teen, I guess. But what happened was that I started working in as a chef in a restaurant, and the same thing happened there as it did in my old town up in Dalarna, up in the north. You get to hang with older people, and you get to adapt their pattern, their set of friends, their daily routines, if you so will. The daily routines with me working as a chef was really hard because you have to get up early in the morning some days, like really early, because restaurants open at 11, so you have maybe start at 7 in the morning to be able to set everything up. So I kind of like think that being a chef sucked, so I started waiting tables instead, because you didn't get much tip inside as a chef in a big restaurant because the waiters took all the tip. And the waiters also got laid a lot, so I guess that's why I wanted to be a waiter. So I started working outside with where all the people was. So at age 17, I was waiting table at some of the best restaurants in Stockholm. I was still not legally aged to go out. I made tons of money. I mean, I made more than I do today, and that's maybe, it must be almost 30 years ago. And even at that young age, it was, as long as you were willing to work, they would give everything to you. You got good tips, you got many friends, as long as you kind of like, for me, I became what I did. I really need to accomplish things to be able to feel at home. And that was the first time I felt that maybe I'm really good at this. And I was, I think, even at that young age. So 17 turned into 18, I guess. And I found many, many other things at that time. Now it's 1989, I think it must be. Okay, so I was making roughly, in that time's money, maybe $10,000 a month, I guess. So the army in Sweden back then, we had everybody at the age of 18 needs to go into the army, and it's called värnplikt in Swedish. I'm not sure what it would be called in English, but you're drafted. You get to just do the army service for at least 7.5 months and tops 15 months. And of course, I did 15 months because I wanted everybody to be impressed by the things I did and stuff like that. So I went from Stockholm, working restaurants and going to nightclubs, doing speeds, also find acid at that time, which was really nice, I think, because then it actually got me to experience something out of my own world. But what happened was that I came from that setting, nightclub, to the army, where I made $3 a day instead of the money I had before. So that was a really, really hard time for me, understanding that I got to go from that place where I had everything. I had girls, I had money, I had drugs, I had party, good music, a lot of culture experience and stuff like that, and went, in a green suit in the forest, feeling almost like a kid again, because that was the settings where I was brought up. So I think that the army life sucked, but I kind of endured it because I still wanted to impress everyone. That was still the big thing for me. So that took a year and a half of my life. But it also calmed my using down a lot, because I mean, having those kind of money and always being out in the forest, it's hard to do a lot of drugs. Of course, when we find booze, we did, and a lot of people brought things to take, even out in the forest. But I mean, the using was really low key at those few years. Got out of the army, and I realized that Stockholm was too little for me as well, because now I've been bored in green clothes for a long time. So I felt that I had to see the world a bit. So I traveled a lot, being young, and if you're a waiter, and I also started doing a bit of bartending as well, and waiting tables and bartending is a really easy way to go around the world, because you can get a job anywhere, easy. If you're good at it and speak English and are nice, then you get a job. So I went to Germany, I went to England, worked there for maybe even a few months, and then I left for like almost like going on a more like a trip-based thing, going to Latin America, going to the US, around in the Middle East a bit, and down in Africa and throughout Europe. And I finally found that there are other drugs than amphetamines, downers, and alcohol and acid. You can also use tons of other things. Coming back to Sweden again, after these few years of easy travel, I started opening up nightclubs from some friends, making sure that they ran well and earned a lot of money to the owners. So we got a lot of money. We also got a lot of drugs, and that's when the cocaine hit my life, I would say. Cocaine was, I mean, that was really the first real love of my life, because that felt like something else. It was fast. Before I knew I was really good. I was a great guy. I thought I was the king, but doing cocaine, I actually felt that I was the king. I felt like I easily was the best guy in the room. I mean, even though many of them were my friends, I still felt like they are, the English word for it, I don't know, but I felt that they were my crew. I was not part of their crew. I'm not sure. Maybe all of us did that, because I guess that everybody thought they were the king in our little community. But what happened was that it kind of like altered my mind so fast that I went from being a nice guy, doing, I mean, like speed is in Stockholm at that time maybe a tenth of the price of cocaine. And speed also lasted a lot longer, so it was a lot cheaper to use. I was starting doing a lot of cocaine at that period. I was maybe 19, 20. So I did cocaine, acid, ecstasy, like, yeah, the party life still, but party life for a bartender that runs a lot of clubs in the nightlife of Stockholm. For me, that was maybe 6 days a week and Mondays off, maybe. Then started a club also named Monday Bar, so I guess that also didn't work out so well. So it was 7 days a week, 20 years of age. But using it in that setting cost me maybe 4 to 5 times as much as I earned. So I started selling drugs. I started stealing things around me, stealing at work. I started to steal things at work to sell to others. Because a bar handles a lot of cash. So in the beginning, you could get enough cash in the bar to be able to buy a new thing or to buy drugs. But at the end, you actually had to steal other things to sell to get drugs. And when then that didn't work, you started selling drugs instead, because that you could earn some money. And at that point, everybody thought of me maybe like a bartender gangster wannabe, I guess, because it looked like that from the outside. I had nice clothes. I know a lot of good or hip friends. I was in that setting that everybody wanted to be in. But what happened was that I always had a lot of cash on me and I always had a lot of drugs on me. None of them mine. I mean, the drugs I've got on krita, what's that in English? You got it to sell it and then you pay it afterwards. I'm not sure what that's called in English, but it wasn't mine. So I sold it for someone else. The money I had in my pocket, I had to pay to someone else. So, and my debts starting to increase. But what happened to me was from the age of 21 to 25 when I quit, it kind of like only swelled. I mean, it got from handling a little cash to more and more and more and more, but exactly the same thing over and over again. It didn't matter how much money I had or how much drugs I had. The drugs always was someone else that I was supposed to sell and pay him the cash. The cash I had is money I owed someone else. So I really didn't have anything to my name at that point, not anything. One of the first experience that I really couldn't handle in my life is, of course, for me, it was when people that I owe money really wanted them back. But the first time I really felt that I had a problem is that there was a festival in 1993, I think, or 94, in Stockholm called Lollipop, which took a lot of great bands from throughout the world that came to Sweden. And I kind of did a lot of drugs on the way out there in the morning. So I was in a really good setting. Came out there, and a friend of mine was released from jail, and he came with a bag full of, I think, 7,000 LSD trips and maybe 10,000 ecstasy tabs. So we started popping those, and when I hit, I think maybe 10, 11, 12 ecstasies, 5 or 6 trips, Prodigy went on stage and the strobe went on. And from that minute, I had a weak blackout. I don't remember anything. The first thing I remember when the strobe went on from the stage is that, when you set a TV and you don't see any picture, it's just the gray, the white to black dots that moves around that thing. That's exactly what happened inside my head. So I didn't see anything. So for the first half hour, I still had some memories. But a week later, I woke up in an apartment inside in Stockholm with a new girlfriend that I've kind of like met throughout that psychotic period. And we hang out for a couple of years, but I really don't know how we met. I really don't know what the fuck happened. No, for me, it always felt like everybody says like I was always responsible for my actions. I always knew what's going to happen. For me, it actually didn't feel like that. It felt like everything around me kind of like made me do stuff that I just did. I didn't want to do them or didn't care. So I didn't have a choice, kind of. It felt like I was not forced, but I was the victim of the circumstances around me. That's how it felt like. Someone said to me, you have to do this, and then I did that. Someone said to me, you can't do that, then I didn't do that because, you know, owing a lot of people money, owing a lot of people drugs, having a lot of debt to pay back all the time, you had to do other things for other people. So at that time, I owed a lot of money, and so I did one thing to clear that out. I took a shipment of drugs into Sweden, so I kind of like cleared my debt, and then came to the bright idea that I should move to the United States instead. So I moved to Los Angeles. I'm sure my age must have been, I was maybe 24, I think, 25, yeah, something like that. I was about, yeah, 24, I guess. So I came to LA working, I was working nightclubs in LA as well, within the hip hop community. So there were a lot of rappers and stuff like that. And my job was to get drugs and company to those tables that came to our nightclub. And that was also a good way to know a lot of people fast. So I got to know a lot of drug dealers and a lot of people with prostitutes. And those people tend to be worse in Los Angeles than in Stockholm. Big shocker. And also a few of the rappers had a thing for Latino. And reaching out to the Latino community in Los Angeles was a bad idea, being a Swede of 24 years of age, blonde, not knowing many people in Los Angeles. So I kind of like did the same thing I always did in Stockholm, having a lot of drugs on me, having a lot of cash on me, but still nothing belonged to me. It was always someone else. And that went back and forth, back and forth. But in the end of my tour in Los Angeles, I was still like, my life was still lived by something else, something inside me that, I mean, didn't work the way it's supposed to, I guess. But I still thought that this is the party, this is as good as it gets. It's not supposed to be better than this. What happened was that I owed a lot of money. I think it was maybe $100,000 to a Latino gang that I really needed to pay back. So they gave me an option to go to Latin America and get some drugs. So I did. First time it was easy because it wasn't that much. I could have it in a small bag and just go through the border. Back in that day, nobody did there were no digital footprints in the border. Everything was on paper. They looked at your passport and stamps like that. You had a Swedish passport. That's the easy part. But to be able to repay my debt in total, I needed to get a bigger shipment. So I went down to Colombia and got a bigger shipment, not fill the car, that sounds really big, but filled a big bag of dope and put it in my trunk of my car, and went to Mexico, where I met up with a Danish girl. I still don't remember her name. I still can't make amends to her, but I used her as my kind of like chaperone going through customs between going to San Diego by car. So we had a trunk full of dope. I guess that would entitle me to a couple of 100 years in prison if I was to be caught then. And for her, she didn't know. And that was one of the first times I was really, really scared. Coming through customs, they just waved us through. I'm not sure if I'm going to thank God for that, but it may be good to be caught as well. But what happened was that for the first time, I felt that I don't get to live my own life. I don't decide what happens. I've known that with drugs for years, that I can't control my drug use. I use drugs every day. I used drugs every day from the age of 22 to the age of 25 when I quit. But the point is that I, for the first time, felt like a slave under something else, that I wasn't the boss at all. I didn't have any choices left. And what happened was that I got back to LA with the dope, and they said, well, this is good. I got some cash as well for that, clearing up the debt, and I got a tip, and I got a brick of cocaine. And I'm not sure if you know what that is, but it's a lot of cocaine. So that's one of the last memories I have of that. 5 weeks later, I woke up naked in a hotel room, people sleeping on the floor, and had no memories of those 5 weeks. I had no money, no drugs. I had a big debt in the receptions. I had to flee that thing. Called my dad to pay me a ticket to go back to Sweden, and he did, which was good because I didn't have any money. Came back, and my father came with a brilliant idea that he's going to sort my life out. So we started a shop back up in the northern part of Sweden. We started a business together, and it was good in the beginning because I wanted to work and impress my dad. So I mean, it was a big thing for me, having my own shop and making my own money, maybe secure a future. But north of Sweden is really not fun, going from Stockholm to LA and then back to up north again. It's called Mora, which is not very, very big. What happened was that back in that day, you had, the credit card machines wasn't the swipe thing with an electronic thing. It was just a thing you did with papers with carbon copies. So I couldn't take those money, but all the cash that came into the shop we had a good turnover. I took my car down to Stockholm Thursday morning maybe, and then partied to Monday evening, got back to Tuesday, back into that northern part again, collecting the money again, took the money, went back to Stockholm, partied them up. That went on for maybe 6 months until the auditor, what do you call it, the revisor, it's called, the bookkeeper, called my dad and said, well, there's something going on up there. I think you need to go and speak to your son. And so he did. And of course, I knew the instant that you have to be at this place at this specific time. I knew what it was about because he had also my sister with him. I said, Fia is going to be here as well. And Fia is an IV user, heroin addict that got clean a year before. So I kind of knew what this was about. When he came, I just went out for a smoke and then just left. I walked from that place. I just wanted to extend the lie, even if I could extend it 5 minutes, it would be okay. It would be better than nothing. Finally, I got back, sat in the room, and admitted for the first time in my life that I actually had a problem. I didn't do that because I thought I had a problem. I did that because that's what everybody said I had. I didn't realize that I was powerless. I just realized that I couldn't handle drugs. I didn't realize that I was kind of messed my life up. I just didn't have a life that I wanted. I'm not sure about you guys, but for me, thoughts of suicide crossed my mind from age 10, then every day to the age of 25, every single day. I never did it. Of course, I'm still here, but it's still that I think at times, I'm not sure if I'm too cowardice or too happy for life to kill myself. But I mean, that's still, when I get scared, I mean, suicide seems like a fucking great idea sometimes. I know it's not, but still, it's a thing that's always haunted me, I think. I'm not sure what you guys think, but that's my experience. So, my family thought that I really needed to go to rehab, so I did. My dad wouldn't pay, so my sister followed with me to the government, have this office where you can get that kind of treatment and they pay for it. She lied to them because I was 25, still had clothes on my back, still had an apartment, owned a car, had a business, even though it was kind of broke since I've stolen all the money from me and my dad. But she convinced them that I really needed help. Back in that days, when I was 25, maybe the only recovering addicts in a rehab was around 45, 50, no teeth, all IV users. Didn't meet any alcoholics at that place. All IV users, all twice my age ish. They thought that I was kind of like a disco addict, doing cocaine and stuff. So I wasn't. They did think I fit in. And I didn't think I fit in. So I sat there on a stool and listened to the God thing and seeing the steps on the wall and listened to those people. And in a few months' time, I started to listen to what people said, because in the beginning I just didn't want to. But then when I started to listen to people, I actually understood that they had the same feelings I did. They didn't have the same consequences that I did. I mean, some had worse consequences and some had less, but for me it was the emotional part that attracted me to the program, and not the happy parts. That what attracted me was that other people were as broken as I was. That was kind of empty inside, and like the suicide thoughts and yeah, all that blackness. That's what attracted me to the program. So I moved from rehab down to Stockholm, which was good for me. There was a lot of meeting there. I I got into another sister fellowship that the CA wasn't run in Stockholm 20 years ago. I think it's 14 years old now. Got into that program, didn't do anything, sat in meetings and lied, I guess, and at some part, maybe 6 months, going to meetings and sitting there and telling my side of the story. An old guy, I think, must be at least 40. No, I think it was like 50 at the time, maybe a bit older as well. He said, well, you don't have to feel like that, you know. You don't have to go around like creating your own world to live in. You don't have to try to adapt. There's a place for you too. And I didn't understand what it means, but I think that anything from that point on that would better my life, I would take. So he said that, okay, let's do the steps. And this was in NA, and they had this step working guide. And he said, we're not going to do that from the beginning. And he brought AA, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, instead. We just go through the steps really quick, and we can look at the other things later on. And we did the steps in a couple of weeks. And I kind of like understood for the first time who the fuck I was. I mean, going from always being depressed, empty, feeling like a shell of a people or a man, to just be content. I wasn't even happy. I mean, that was such a big shift for me, going from miserable to content. Really felt like a big spiritual experience for me. And when I went from content to happy for the really first time, like joyfully happy, like kid happy, running around in the forest happy, I mean, that was such a bliss for me. So I started going to a lot of meetings, doing a lot of surveys, starting groups and stuff like that. Years went by in my recovery. And here comes the other part, that what happens if you have a couple of years of sobriety is that, for me, I went to less meetings. I started to think that people were idiots in meetings. I thought they didn't carry the message the way I think they should carry the message. I thought that they were telling too much about their own life, too little about the solution. Having the solution is really easy to say to someone else, that you can go from that state to something else. But if you are in that state, they don't understand that you're allowed to be happy. So for me, I stopped going to my regular meetings, and I went to my first CA meeting. They've been open a couple of months. It was one CA meeting on Thursdays in Stockholm at 7 o'clock in a place. I came down. There were two guys there. One was high, and the other one had, I think, 1 week clean. So I knew that was not the place for me. This was, I think, in 2003 or something like that. So I did what every reasonable adult would do. I found myself a new woman. I built a house. I started 2 businesses. I got a kid. And I didn't attend any meetings. I started to polish my outside again, and not taking care of my internal life at all. And that went from being okay. I had a lot of drive because I had a lot of energy from not doing drugs. So I still have a lot of time, I think. But what happened was that it felt less and less good inside. So I started to lie to we were living together. We weren't married. I started to collect debt again inside the business, and I was too afraid to tell my partners. So the 2 businesses went from being a really good business to being a really shitty businesses. That's a long story, but what happened to me is at the end of my using, I knew that I was powerless over a lot of things, but it felt like I had the drug to blame. When the first years in the program, I always had something. We have to fight the drug or the drug use. Never pick up, they said. But in the end, it felt like, yeah, you always had something to blame. Being sober and do the things I did to my partners, to my then girlfriend, to my son, to my family, to all my surroundings. I mean, it's really bad. I mean, it was so bad in my businesses. All my partners would have gone to jail if the police came and knocked on the door, because I didn't pay taxes. I didn't do anything of the things you're supposed to do, and that's tax fraud, and that's punished by jail in this country. So I came up with the bright idea that I wanted to go to the doctor and get those happy pills, because I know that everybody did them nowadays. And this was, I think, 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago. And outside the doctor's office, I met an old friend of mine that I got sober. He now have 14 years sober, I think. And he asked me how my life was, and I was saying that it was really shitty and it didn't work out the way it was supposed to, I think. And I kind of like stood there a bit and complained about my life. And then he asked me what I was doing there. And I said, I'm going to the doctors and see if I can get some prescription of medication, because I feel really down. And then he said, well, Johan, have you forgotten that you're a drug addict? And that's the first time in years that I remembered that I actually was a drug addict. Of course I knew it. I didn't drink, I didn't do drugs, but it kind of like slipped my mind that I had a thing inside me that I had to take care of. So I followed him to a meeting instead of going into the doctor's office and start the relapse, I guess. Coming back, did the steps again in a couple of weeks, and made a new 4th step list that was really long and really heavy. A lot of economical debt and a lot of betrayal to my fellows around me. And for the first time in my life, I was really You know, back in the day when I got sober the first time, it was like, well, yeah, my life was shit. I was powerless over this and that. But this was the first time in my life that I felt that I'm fucking crazy. I'm really insane. And I kind of like didn't get that the first time I got in, but now it felt like, you know, I'm gonna fuck my life up so bad, so I really need to commit to the program. And since that day, I've been utterly powerless, but I've also been extremely happy. I've repaid all my debts. I made all those amends. I still have some amends to do, but they're minor things and mostly emotional things. And it also made me realize that the chaos lives inside me, and my only solution is the program. Uh, yeah, fuck man, this is strange. I think I'll stop there. Thanks.